Hi, Meena. It's again after a long time, but still, somehow this is kind of destined, right? The last time we met was also discussing a book of yours.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just think probably after Manu Joseph's book and this whole discussion on this, I would feel the session would take the discussions to a different level. I'm not just going to give a detail this thing about your work. All of the people here would be familiar with your work. But maybe we should directly talk about this particular book that we are going to discuss here. So, when we think about exquisite cadavers, one thing that comes to my mind, when I started reading it, this is something people often talk about your work, and you also tell us a lot about this, that it is theoretically dense. And, even the earlier poems, I remember teaching one of your poems in class where you're talking about the Mulligatawny dreams, where you talk about being an Indian in many different ways and the whole idea of identity. So it keeps coming back in your writings, and probably somewhere in the introduction you try to say that this is not about theory, this is something different. But somehow I feel that it's again bringing us back into theory. So probably we'll start there. What is this relationship with the theory that when you write?
Um, for those who may lack the context, Sherin is a professor, and she teaches comparative literature. And the first request I actually said was, "Please, ma'am, no theory questions." Because I'm having a very horrible migraine. Everybody is appearing in a blur, but I will try to answer it. I think at some point you realize when you're a writer, and especially writer from, let's say, the margins in some way, women, lower caste, Tamil speaker, because a lot of the Indian English writing, at least for a few decades earlier, used to be dominated by other languages. So, you're writing from the south, which itself is ignored in the rest of India. You're writing from a different positionality. You're writing not from a certain middle class. I mean, I have a middle class existence, but most of the writing tries to sidestep that, with Gypsy Goddess or with the poetry or with the field work. And when you're writing all of these places, you understand very easily that you lose control, because it's all these texts are read in a certain way. And I'm like, obvious, there's so much in literary theory that says, the death of the author is dead. You cannot go and decide how your work should be received. But then I think that at some point, you really have to realize that. And I think this is same for women academics as well. Unless you're citing each other's works, no one else is citing you. No one else is giving you credit. They're going to take the idea, run with it, and they're going to cite their friends. And I really think the same thing happens with women if you're a writer as well. Unless you are also doing what is not just fiction, auto-fiction, but also auto-theory, in the sense that you are theorizing what you're writing about. You are claiming not just the space of fiction or poetry or non-fiction, but also saying, I'm going to take the, I don't know, what is it, the paratextual or the metatextual, whatever else you can call it, or, to take that space as well, and to say, well, my work comes from this background, or, it is speaking to this moment. And I think that it becomes a kind of burdensome thing, but if you don't do it, somebody else is going to flatten your narrative. So, and I think that it's really important, because the laws of control, or this necessity to expound, comes because otherwise, who else is going to give you a work that critical edge? And I think in one way, it's a fallout of the fact that, academic training means that at some point you are going to look at it self-reflexively and self-critically, but also you realize the huge gaps. And the second thing, and I never planned it this way, but what I realized was that it's an absolute guerrilla strategy. Because, there are bestseller lists, and, people are reading some writers, and some writers are everywhere. But I can always say with a lot of conviction, now that I've been writing for 20 years, is that everyone encounters my work, not in bookshops, but in the university. And that's something in some way, the place that, is not necessarily democratic and not necessarily under the market, is still a place where you manage to find your space. And I think that a part of it is because of this being grounded in theory, because I mean, like, this theory does come from praxis, but I think it's really grounded somewhere.
Obviously, Meena, in the sense, like, we find it, I would say, a pliable text to teach kind of thing in class, but the students also really relate to it in a better way when we take it to the classroom. Now, coming to the book, actually, I don't know how many of them have read it, but I would just talk about the structure. The book has a very beautiful structure, visibly also. If you want to take a look at it, see, sorry. Yeah, so the book has, like, the two parallel plots. On the margin, there is one plot running where the author speaks, and then the main plot besides it, like, it at the by the side of it, which is the story of the protagonist that she's talking about. So on one side, the margin, the author speaks, and the story runs by the side of the author's speech. And you said that, like, you were also judged in some ways, especially by the earlier work, where you're talking about your personal experience and the direct kind of linking with a whole lot of issues, domestic violence. And then being in the West, particularly, where they kind of put down women from the global South, particularly as women who suffer, who are victims. So you wanted to take your voice in a different way, like, in some ways claiming yourself. So this particular structure, she says she's trying to keep away the author in the margin. The author is just a marginal presence, and then another plot runs. But there are ways you are claiming it, and I really like the way you said the pregnancy is one instance when you kind of, like, claim that proximity with the protagonist or the fictional character. Otherwise, she is just a marginal voice. So tell us a little more about the structure.
Um, so this is really interesting. I mean, it ties into the earlier question as well. But the thing is, women of the global South have it difficult, in terms of just people accepting that we have brains. I mean, like, it's a very small thing, the lowest common denominator. But so, women in the South go and, join a liberation struggle. They carry arms. They fight for self-determination. They become tigresses. There's like the only response, the flattened narrative that comes out is they were brainwashed. So, and then the same thing, women of the South, you would have written a lot of books before, translated a lot. Then you get into a bad marriage, you write about it, and then it's like, oh, that's a memoir about a bad marriage. And it's like, no, I know what book I was writing. I was writing a novel, I'm never denying it's based on my experience. But obviously, if I spent 5 years writing it, I should know what it is, right? I should know if it's an autobiography. I should know if it was a memoir. I should know what I'm going to call it. But then others always decide they know better than you. And I don't think anyone else will get away doing this to a white male writer. They wouldn't even do this to, like, a Savarna Indian writer. So I was like, I mean, like, people are taking this away from you. And then I realized that when you come from some parts of the world, or when you come from some places in the social hierarchy, it's so easy to just reduce you into victimhood. And not understand that, okay, maybe you're intellectualizing it, maybe you're theorizing it, maybe you're bringing into it some literary quality, maybe you're like any other artist who is going there, sitting in front of a piece of paper and deciding, how do I say this story as if it's a story that has to be told, and because if I go to the page, and I really have to tell this as a fact, if I go to the page thinking that I suffered, that I felt pain, that I'm going to cry, why was life unfair, you can't produce art. Like, art has to come from that discipline where you're like, all this shit happened to me, but I'm going to do art. Like, I'm going to write literature with a capital L, art with a capital A. And there, like, you have to put your emotional component away and, like, look at it, like, how do I get all of this into words? How do I get, and for me, especially, it's always been that, writing is 9/10 of it is thinking, and the last 10th part, I mean, which is the frosting on the cake, which is, that's where all the craft comes in, where, like, the language comes in, where the structure comes in, where, your use of pauses or, characterization, everything else is in this 1/10 of it. So, for me, the thinking is the most important part of writing. And I think that is stolen from you, right? So there is a general pushback towards it to say that, if you're from the global south, people are reading your work as a diary. It doesn't matter what you write, it's always read as a diary. And so it's like, so, and why are you interesting? You're not interesting because you have interesting things to say. You're interesting because bad things happen to you, horrible stuff happened to you, or horrible stuff happened to your country. And therefore, like, you're interesting precisely because of that. Like, okay, you're Palestinian, it's interesting because, let's say 1 million of your people are being genocided, and it's live streamed. Therefore you're interesting. You're not interesting because of what do you have to say about self-determination, what do you have to say about armed struggle, what do you have to say about all these questions of land and colonization and settler colonialism. I mean, that part is erased. And I think for me it was like, no, to say no, but I have things to say. And for me, process is important. So why does nobody discuss process with you? Like, and why is it only like, nobody asks you these kinds of questions? Like, how do you write? Are you using Microsoft Word? I don't know, like random stuff that people are interested about others. So I thought that this is quite, for me it was important. And I also felt that it's almost like, I don't know how to say this, but it was like a work where I had to excavate and say, okay, come and, it's like, come and watch me undress. Come and watch me so that, I'm a real person, and come and watch me so that you realize how all this goes on. So it's like, either you're loving somebody into your studio, or you're loving somebody into your very sacred, intimate inner spaces and saying, okay, this is what is happening. And then you show, and I think part of the column was to show my life as it exists, with all of its, domesticity, with all of its drama, and then try to show how does fiction come out of this? Where do I find inspiration? How do I distill what's happening in my life into something else? How do I project my life onto that of the character? Which is why when I had, well, all my pregnancies were unplanned, but yeah, when I had an unplanned pregnancy, the character as well goes through it. And so I feel that, oh, there's a projection going on, but also I think at some point, what I realized many years after writing Exquisite Cadavers, because it came out in COVID time, right? 2021, I think, 21 or 2020. So when this book came out, and the Indian re-edition is out now, so when I think that book came out, I think one of those things for me was, it was not just my life that was being projected on the characters, but actually the character's life. In 3-4 years, I felt it was being reprojected back to me, because I think at the heart of this book is this question where there's a Tunisian filmmaker and he has to decide, do I live the cozy life in London where, I'm a token Arab man who can be the Arab intellectual stand-in, or do I go back to Tunisia and do I do the good fight? And for him, it's such a pressing question. And I always thought that was Karim's question, that was Karim's life. That Karim had, as a filmmaker, had this doubt, He doesn't want to be treated as a second-class, token Arab filmmaker in London, but he could contribute more when he went home. And the book ended for me like, I remember finishing this book when I'm like 37, 38 weeks pregnant. And a week later, my baby is born, and like, I'm done with the book, I'm done with the baby. They both have their own life. And then I come back to it, and I realize that actually Karim's life, the question that he was grappling with, and I was not aware of it as I was writing it, was actually such a fundamental question to me, because a year after the book came back, I decided, and I came back to India. So I think it just flows both ways as well. I think just as your life influences fiction, I think your fiction also influences your life. And I have found like so many examples of it. I'm like becoming slightly superstitious here, but it's not true. Like sometimes you project your life on the paper and then it just comes back and becomes your life. So,
yeah, Meena. One question about reading as a process. Like when I was looking at this work, for me, it's also about your relationship with your reader. On the margins, there's like your personal narrative, your ruminations, and then there is a fictional part of it, which is like, a lot of it is also projection, but then you claim it as fictional. So I also feel it is talking about the reader's experience in many ways. Like, this is how we punctuate our readings, right? We read and then we go back to the footnote or we go back to the margins. And throughout, I felt the book is a critique of that reading process, or you're trying to kind of approach the perfect reader or mold the perfect reader. Because, like, every time these days, like every line we read, we need to go back to the footnote, go back to Wikipedia, go back to now all the AI tools. We want to find out, did this really happen in her life? Did this happen in someone's life whom she knows? So that interventions that you make and your critique of this whole reading process, I feel it comes out so well in the way.
Yeah, I have two answers to that. I think the first answer to it is that I think it's, even in the 5 years since that book was written, I think things have really escalated very badly in terms of reading. Like now, yesterday I was reading something that said that on Netflix, they're asking people who are writing the script for stuff, they're telling them, please be aware there's a second screen. And that people are only giving you 60% of their attention because they're watching Netflix, but they're also browsing on their phones. So, you have to have shorter story arcs, you have to have character tell you what they're doing. So, I think the second screen effect is like something even, like with the advent of phones, people want to find out everything. People want to know what everything is. I think there is that specific aspect of it that really does pervade. And the second question, I think, is like a broader question, which is about how is the women writer read? And I'm speaking from Kerala, where I really think that, it's not just, I choose Kerala as an example. I mean, this is the best place that I've been as a writer, but I still choose this example because right from Kamala Das to Arundhati Roy to, a lot of the writers, because at least here women are respected. You can, drop names and everyone knows them. I'm not sure how it works elsewhere in India, but, is the women writer read or is the women writer consumed? And I always have this question. I think that the women writer is consumed. I think people are very, very curious about you. You write something, she had sex. Okay, that means Meena had sex. That she has to be Meena, that Mary Sue has to be you. So it's like anything that you write about anybody, anywhere, like it can be anything. I mean, I'm taking the grossest example, but the grossest example or, the most, whatever is, is out there that people want to project onto you. And I think that projection into the female writer, into the women writer, I think it's extensive, and it's also like in some way it's a cannibalization of you, because on the one hand we were talking about academic cannibalization, right? Everybody is theorizing you, and if you refuse to theorize yourself, then that space doesn't exist. And here they're consuming you, and you know that they want to know so much about your life. It's almost like, oh, but you're writing all these intimacies, did it happen to you? You're writing about all of this love, and did it happen to you? And then I realized that there is, how do you work with the system? How do you work with the system that is so much interested in your life as opposed to, and I think that, yes, far more people would know about me than actually have read me, but whatever it is. And at some point I also remember meeting Kunal Kamra, the comedian, and he said to me that I use your name as a litmus test, Meena. So I say your name to somebody, and what they think of you tells me what their politics are. It tells me where they stand. And I never realized that, like at some point, so the writer is not just the writer. I'm not just a stand-in for the books I wrote. I'm also a stand-in for a lot of opinions on a lot of topics. Like you just kind of divide a room, litmus test type of person. And then I realized that how do you actually, I don't know if it was a conscious decision, but now looking back, I think the only way to satiate or to keep this public or to keep this, the reader, but the reader is also a mob, the reader is also an individual, the reader is also a community, a collective, the reader is also people waiting to cancel you. How do you keep them happy? Is that they're always going to be curious, and you're always going to fight for your right to privacy. Because my privacy is inalienable. The people in my life are the ones, I love and I have to protect. And then I realized that you have to feed them what makes them happy, so that they don't want to know more than that, because they're happy with what you feed them. So yeah, you feed them the story of, my husband who's been making coffee for the last 12 years for me, and then they have something there. I love him because he never wakes me when I'm asleep, so they have something there. And I think that, which means that they don't want to find out more. Like, there has to be something you give them. And I think it's really, it's a cruel barter, but a barter that you can make in some ways to have the privacy for the rest of your life. And I think that's how I'm managing this, the reader.
Yeah, just to push that women writer thing a bit more, you were talking already about, like, how you are judged as a woman writer in some ways. I find you, or I see you as one of the most political writers in contemporary India, Meena, because you're like overtly engaging with political questions. Even in this book, like in one line, you refer to a lot of things that is happening in contemporary India, political conspiracies, arrests, like, all kinds of things. And now when we come to, like, and then even in the fictional part of the text, you're talking about the Tunisia, the Arab Spring, and all those things. So I'm just thinking, like, how do you kind of manage this? You are so political, you're talking about engaging directly with a whole lot of things. You're literally present in the middle of so many happening things in India, but still, like, your words will be taken as, like, as you said, when you say the character slept with someone, or had this thing happening in somebody's life, a love failure, you'll be immediately reduced to that kind of a thing. And it's not just you. If you think about, like, Kerala has a very old example of that. When we think about Kamala Das, whatever she wrote was reduced to those minor voyeuristic kind of things, whereas she was one of the, and she's an all-time great writer that India has ever seen. So, do you
No,
have
I really think that a lot about Kamala Das, and I think Exquisite Cadavers in some ways also a homage to her, because I think we are separated by 50 years of age, I think, but not age, but yeah, whatever it is. She's much older than me. But no, I actually started reading and came into poetry and came into a lot of writing also because of Kamala Das. But one thing that, when I was writing this book was, she wrote my story and she called it a novel. No, she called it a biography. And everyone went after her that she had to actually retreat and say, well, this is a work of fiction. This is a work of imagination. So we live in a society where today I'm writing a novel and I'm saying this is a work of fiction. I mean, it's based on my life, but it's still a novel. And people are like, no, it's not a novel. It has to be your life. I mean, like, it doesn't matter. It's almost like if you're a woman, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Like, you can write something, and like society is like, when she wrote the book, they were like, oh, but how could she have had all this sex? It must be imaginary. Or, like, how could she be such a bad person? That she had to say, no, some of it is fictional, like, and I think that's the thing with women, like, you can be, right? So you can, and she's extremely political. That's the thing. She converted to Islam, and then much before that, she contested elections in '84. And she also did something which for me was very phenomenal, is that she's written all these poems because she was in Colombo when the anti-Tamil riots were happening, in Black July was happening. So she's somebody who is so politically engaged. But I think the one person who gave me good advice about this is my father. He's like, Meena, I beg you, never write about sex, because then that's all they'll reduce you to. And then, I mean, like 5 years later, he's like, Meena, you have to write about sex because no one else is writing anything anyway. So it's like, okay, that noted. So, but I really think that, like, they want to flatten you. And the same thing, like, how do you de-intellectualize a person? You de-intellectualize them by bimboing them. Like, somebody came and told me, you radicalized a lot of bimbos. Like that, as if that's my contribution to Indian English literature. But, so I think that, they have to find ways to flatten you, but it's okay.
No, I also think it's unfair because a lot of male writers get away with things, get away. When I say get away, I mean that
no, they
nothing
are looked at as political writers. I don't think I'll ever be looked at as a political writer. I think I'll be looked on as a controversy seeking, rabble rousing, a person who wants to, I don't know, say the wrong thing at the wrong time type of label. But yeah.
Are we supposed to take questions from the audience?
I think we can.
We can. We have time for at least one question. One question at least, yeah.
One question. Yeah. Now or
it says 3 p.m. end time, no?
We will start the next session at 3.
Oh, okay. We'll finish.
Yeah. Shall we open it up for questions?
1 or 2 questions.
Like, we have 10 minutes. That gives us 10 minutes for questions. We'll take questions if you have any. Otherwise, I'll ask the next.
Yeah, someone will ask. Oh, yes, sir.
I read your book about that village. The whole village was toned down by the upper caste.
Yeah, yes.
At that time or after that, did you feel any repercussions from the upper caste people for having written that book in such raw and agonizing manner. You heard me?
Yes, yes, I heard you. No, I think it's there's something quite interesting about Keel Venmani and the protest there, because the book doesn't end with just the killing of the 44 Dalit people who are protesting, right? The book ends with them getting revenge. And then what form does the revenge take? How does the Naxalbari start affecting people? You know, what does the communist movement do? How does this entire liquidation of landlords, you know, starts acting out? So I think that the landed communities, the feudal communities actually had to make peace. They had to either flee or they had to make peace with the fact that, you know, agricultural workers had to have some rights respected. And so I think that that story was, because I was coming into it very late. So the incident happened in 68. So I felt that there was enough time between then and now for me not to have direct repercussions of, you know, writing that book. Yeah, sure.
Thanks. I love the form of this book, and I wonder if you could talk a bit about your approach to experimenting with form and what you think the value of experimenting is.
So in the beginning, I always used to think that, you know, it's the same thing, right? Like the content decides the form, and the content that we are dealing with is not straightforward. So if talking about Gypsy Goddess, which is about, let's say, the murder of 44 Dalit people, or, you know, domestic violence, which is a very a thing that happens, causes disassociation in your own self, or you write a book like this, which you know, you're calling into question the reader, you're calling into question the writer, you're calling into question how does one happen to become the other. Then you're naturally going and seeking forms that are do justice to your content. So I think one of that comes from this, but I also think, and this is really, really true of me, is that I can't work with anything unless it excites me every day. Like, you know, if I find it boring, then I can't do a book. And a book is something that takes 5-6 years to write, like a full novel, and then you'll have to, it has to be so exciting that it brings you every day, or, you know, like whenever you're inspired back to it. And I think, yeah, experimentation is my way of not getting bored or bogged down with what I'm working on. So
I also just want to add one sentence to it, Meena. It's a book that invites, through its form, it invites the reader directly to engage. Something like Calvino's If on a Winter's Night. Without reader shaping, forming the rest of it, the book cannot survive.
yeah, that's my favorite book of all time. So
yeah, so there's a direct kind of connection. Immediately I was thinking, you are invited to be part of the form of the book, which is really good. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to listen to you every single time. And my question is stupid when I think about it, but the idea is, you know, in terms of the rise of artificial intelligence, the large language models that are coming up, how do you think that would affect your idea of representation from the global south?
No, I think I have a big quarrel going on with all of LLMs, because people started writing to me and asking me for poems that I had not written but were, you know, attributed to me because somebody put it on a university syllabus. And then I went and I found on YouTube they had entire videos of a fake poem that I never wrote, because AI must have generated that poem for them. So I think AI is like, you know, just running really wild. And then at that point I was still like, you know, it's happening in the university domain, like, you know, we can call it out, and, you know, you put out a tweet or something, it's going to stop there. And then I was on Instagram, and there was like, I think I have become like, I don't know, some marketplace roomie, or like roomie 2.0, or budget Indian roomie. So there was like, yeah, she has grace and spine or something, and Meena Kandasamy, girl in a sari. I was like, I don't think I ever wrote this. But also, you see, like, you know, at 40, you still have the, at least my memory is a sieve, but I still have enough memory to know I didn't write a line. Imagine I'm like really old, like 85, and somebody quotes, this is from Meena Kandasamy. And I'm like, maybe I wrote that. No, but it really reads like, you know, I think they get the politics right, maybe not the wording right. So she's like, history was a door slammed in her face. And I'm like, wow, I didn't write that. But they have done a very nice near approximation. So yeah, you have to give it to AI. I mean, like it's stolen all our work and trained its models so well. So yeah, AI is a big problem. But hopefully, I think that the main thing is we should not, in the language of software engineers, we should not lose the source code. To know how to write. That's the source code. That's really important. We can't lose that. I think so. Thank you.